I'm Vernon Boldick with Charlie Clark. Charlie, you just got back from a meeting. You had a bunch of meetings today. So what all were you doing today on the campaign trail?
Today we met with, I just met with some residents in North Park, had a community meeting in St. Mark's Community Hall. It was really nice. Some volunteers brought people together to invite them in to talk about things like the 33rd Street Bridge and growth plan and safety in the community. And actually Meewasin came up a lot. And then I've been preparing for debates and meeting with some different other communities. It's a busy time on the home stretch.
Yeah, just a bit over a week left.
That's right.
So you were a councillor for 10 years. So I guess get curious, what got you to first run for city council in the beginning?
I ran in 2006. I was working at the time in community mediation and community economic development in different projects to try and provide more opportunity in the inner city and to provide mediation services within the restorative justice system. And there was a feeling at the time that there was a lack of younger people involved in politics in the city, that younger people were all leaving Saskatoon, and that the council at the time was sort of a 10 vote to 1 council. Owen Fortosky was 1 vote and everybody else was on another side. And there were some very important issues that were being debated, like the Stone Child inquiry had come down with, and there was tension in the community between the Indigenous community and policing and the wider community. The Gather Coal debate had happened. There was debates about using library taxes to build an overpass to a future neighborhood called Stonebridge, which now is a complete neighborhood. And I could see that it was becoming very polarized in some of these issues. And as somebody who comes from a background of mediation and knowing that a polarized situation just tends to end up with a win-lose, that doesn't, municipal politics can be more about win-win if you have politics that's focused on not having people get divided into camps, but creating ways for people to build understanding across different perspectives. The business, and rather than being pro-business or anti-business, look at ways that different perspectives can come to the table. You don't want to be a city that's downtown versus the suburbs, or east side versus west, or left versus right. You have to engage the whole community in solving the problems that you face. And so I decided to step forward and run.
And do you feel like a lot of those issues were now addressed and it was less of a win-lose and we've taken more of a win-win at City Hall?
Well, I think that dynamic is always part of politics, and but what I've been proud of as a councillor is times when I've been able to break down those polarizations. So, for example, on Broadway back in 2008, there was a very growing tension in the community because there was a new big development proposal for a 17-story building on Broadway. There was tension about parking between residents and between business owners. There was a concern that the bars were creating a lot of problems for the surrounding residents. And we had a number of cases at City Hall where the City Council was asked to make a decision and the landowners were on one side and the residents were on another, and it was win-lose, win-lose. And I said, this isn't working. We're not solving problems in a way that's getting the best solutions out, and people are just getting more and more frustrated with each other. So I sat down with the Business Improvement District, I sat down with the head of the community association, I sat down with some landowners and said, let's find out if there's more common ground. And we established a process to develop what's now called the Broadway 360 plan, a new set of development guidelines for Broadway, an architectural control district, and some plans around parking and some of these other things. And now there's a whole new relationship between all those different players. Same thing with homelessness. Back several years ago, there was a proposal to just ban all panhandling in the downtown, because as the city was growing, so were activities and concerns about street activity and street homelessness and all those things. And it was starting to become divided between downtown businesses and community organizations like the Lighthouse and people who were concerned about poverty. And I learned that in Calgary they took a very different approach than just trying to ban panhandling or arrest their way out of these issues. They actually incorporated something called a housing first approach to homelessness. And so I worked with the Health Region and the United Way and the Lighthouse and the Salvation Army and the Tribal Council and others to come together and say, rather than picking a win-lose approach to this, let's learn from what succeeded in other cities and do have a paradigm shift in how we address homelessness. And that has eventually led, because of a lot of hard work by a lot of different people, to the business community, the United Way, social agencies, the police, all working together to come up with the Plan to End Homelessness and a successful initiative to house over 40 of the most chronically homeless people in our community.
And so your plan, in your work to end homelessness in the city, does that contribute at all to your plan of cutting or saving in the city $500 million?
Well, the $500 million is actually, so these are related to those Broadway and homelessness is downtown issues. But the other big issue we have to address is how we grow into the future. Cities across North America have learned too late that you cannot build your way out of traffic problems, and that if you sprawl out onto the edges of the farmland, all you end up with is congestion and very expensive infrastructure. So over the last 5 years, I've been part of, with many people in the community and with the city administration, the Growing Forward plan to say, what do we need to be doing now to design a city, our future growth, so that by the time we reach half a million people, 500,000 people, we're a well-planned city, longer-term planning. And what we identified is, if we can create more infill, grow in the downtown, around the university, along our major corridors, and see future growth happen in a more balanced way, not just on the outside edges of the city, grow our new neighborhoods in a way that are better designed for transit and for more efficient transportation, we can save $500 million in the need in the future to create overpasses, to try and widen our existing roads, to build more bridges that would have to happen if we just keep growing as we are now. It's a very crucial time for the city to change our growth pattern, because we can learn from the mistakes of Calgary and Edmonton. And if we can save that $500 million in future overpasses, then we can use some of those savings to reinvest in what we've already built, because that's the problem we're seeing.
So we're saving that money by not building that extra infrastructure, which is inefficient.
That's right. By avoiding future overpasses, by making sure that our roads are being used, the ones that are being used now are used more efficiently with better transit services, by putting people closer to where their jobs actually are. That's what it comes down to. You know, the more neighborhoods you add on the outside edge of the city, that's more people that have to drive and more traffic that's going around. The more you locate people and you create opportunities to live closer to the center, you just save money on transportation. And that's how we can save that $500 million.
One of the issues that's been very spoken about in the election is the issue of crime. And Saskatoon is top of Canada per capita right now for violent crimes. What are some of your goals to help curb that?
Yeah, it's not a very statistic to be proud of, the fact that there still is a high crime rate in Saskatoon. And our Chief Wayhill and every police chief across the country that I've talked to, because I sit on the Canadian Association of Police Governance, so I've learned about best practices in policing, that simply hiring officers and trying to arrest your way out of crime is not the answer. I was talking earlier about the Plan to End Homelessness and what I've seen in our community when it comes to trying to change the way we do things to address the root causes and get people off the streets in the first place, to prevent some of the concerns from happening, and give people what is essentially more of a health issue than a criminal issue, to help to provide stability for people. The problem we still have in Saskatoon, though, is that, and my experience with the Plan to End Homelessness has shown me this, mental health, addictions, the justice system, social services, and the social agencies that are out there, policing, they're not working together. People are bouncing around between the system, and it's resulting in addictions not being treated, family breakdown happening, and not being addressed before it causes. Mental health concerns not being addressed, gangs and youth incarceration that comes from some of these family breakdown issues. The money's being spent, but we're not seeing a coordinated approach to addressing these things. And so the city in itself cannot solve these. You cannot put a Band-Aid on them, but the most successful cities and communities out there have been the ones that have been able to create a more coordinated system. And the Plantain homelessness is an example. You take a coordinated approach to the chronically homeless and you support them to get into and stay into housing. We need to do the same thing with families. We need to do the same thing with people who have mental health and addictions issues, and work with some of the really talented organizations that we already have in the city, like Straight Up, that working to get gang members out of gangs in the first place, and then working to go to schools and talk to kids about why they should, giving them alternatives for gangs, and then having the activities for them and the sense of support to kids so that they don't get drawn into the gang life, which I think in many cases provides them a community that they don't otherwise have. You have to get in there and create the systems that support people to succeed in the first place. And the systems are not working together in the way they need to, and the mayor has a chance to be a leader and a champion for bringing a new approach to how we address those things.
So what will some of your steps be to help coordinate a more practical and efficient
I've already been talking to many leaders in the city who know that we can do better in Saskatoon. There was a chance to really show leadership on this in 2013 when the Safe Streets Commission was created, and Don Atchison was part of that and was a spearhead of that, but he didn't actually carry it through. It didn't progress, and it just fizzled out. Nobody knows what happened to it. There's never been an explanation, but a lot of the big players were at the table, and that's why I'm running for mayor. Is that Don Atchison has been somebody who's very good at going to events and very good at being sort of a cheerleader for the city, but when it comes to actually looking at what are the issues that are affecting our community now, and how can I use my role as mayor to bring the people together who can help solve this and move the issue forward, that hasn't happened, and the Safe Streets Commission was a good example. Whereas what I've experienced is with the Plantain homelessness, we did bring the people together and we moved it forward and we were able to make real success on a lot of people's lives. Same thing on Broadway. That's what I think that's the most powerful thing the mayor can do, is to have a vision for how we can do better and then bring the players around the table who can help make that happen and to do it. I would also put 2 citizens back on the police commission so that the police commission itself is a more transparent and accountable body to the wider community, a less political body. The police chief wants to step up and be part of this. There's key leaders in the health region who want to be part of this. There's people in the business community who want to be part of this. We have the talent in the city to turn this around, but you need a mayor who's going to actually make it happen.
And that kind of gives us to the next question we have. We've been asked this, we've been out talking to people in the public what issues are important to them. And one thing that's been brought up by quite a number of people is the transit.
You mean in terms of the negotiations?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news about the negotiations, in my view, is, and it's taken a while to get here, but we're settled on almost all of the key issues, the wage issues, some of the benefits, some of the different things that have been outstanding. Now the only issue is the language in the pension, and there is a difference right now because the ATU has said that they want to have different language in their pension agreement than the other 8 unions in the city that all are part of the same pension plan have. And it's an untenable situation because these other 8 unions have negotiated in good faith a set of agreements and language for what the pension can be, and they're all in the same pension, so it's hard to have one and not the other. I have a background though in mediation, as I said, and I know that when it comes to bargaining, you have to keep sitting at the table and keep finding a way to understand what's underneath and what's at the heart of the barriers and find a creative way to overcome that and come up with a settlement. I also think that it's important that we have a chance to talk to all of the members and make sure they understand that the pension has been the benefits, every benefit that every member has already achieved is going to be protected and looked after in terms of the pension plan. There have been changes to the plan that have been negotiated by all the unions, but their pensions are still protected, and that's part of dealing with the fact that there was a $76 million liability. And I think once there's a chance for everybody to understand the whole of the picture, and the fact that nobody's going to lose their pension, and that there is a plan in place to protect them, we will be able to find a way through. It's been a challenging situation, and as mayor, I will just make sure we're staying at the table and getting a resolution, and finding a way to get underneath whatever the positions are to come up with that.
And I guess we'll move on to thank you. Moving on to a different question. If you become mayor, we've had a lot of people questioning about taxes versus property.
This is an issue that I have been consistent on, and that I am different from the other two candidates. There has been a proposal, a request for a council. In 2013 it happened, and now to shift business taxes, to make business taxes lower by making residential taxes higher. It's called the property tax ratio. So making a higher residential tax so that lower business taxes could be. What's being proposed is to go from 1.75 ratio to 1.43. What this means is a 3.5% tax increase for all residents, and a decrease for businesses, and a shift of $6.5 million onto homeowners. I don't support this because I know already that relative to other cities, businesses are already paying much lower taxes here, and a much smaller contribution relative to other cities of the taxes that we receive to provide services to residents. So we're already the most competitive tax jurisdiction. It makes no sense to lower that even further, especially when there's seniors and young families and people who are trying to stay in their houses. They've seen a lot of tax increases as it is, and they're getting stretched to stay in their homes. It's not logical. Kelly Moore has said that she's can lower business taxes, shift it onto residential taxes, and still lower taxes overall. That is impossible. There is no path. And if that was possible, we would have seen that happen in the last 5-6 years, when we've seen great growth in our economy. We've seen all kinds of investments, because of come in because the conditions have been good for our economy, but taxes have not gone down. They have still gone up, and residents are already paying 14% more taxes because of a shift that happened from 2001 to 2010. That didn't go away when the economy grew. And so I think it's a very dangerous proposition for the city at this time, because we need to have the taxes coming in and the revenues coming in so we can pay for the services that people value. And if this shift was to go through, it would undermine our ability to do that. And then we're not going to be able to attract businesses, because we won't be able to keep our roads clear and have good leisure centers and parks and facilities for families, which is what people need, what we need in order to attract people to move here. So I will not shift business taxes onto homeowner taxes. And that is the difference between me and the other candidates.
Well, you've been out a lot talking to different people, and one thing I found is a lot of youth are really excited for you, and they really want you in. What do you have to say to them to get them out?
Well, this is your city, right? This is the city government is going to make the decisions that will shape your city for the future. Do you want a city with a vibrant downtown? Do you want a city with a good bus system? Do you want a city that has low traffic? Do you want a city that supports the arts and music scene and the entertainment scene? Do you want a city that is making progress on climate change and becoming more efficient? We're the highest greenhouse gas producing city per capita in the country. We are almost in the world, and we have a chance, I think, to show leadership in turning that around. And you have to get involved in your city. Of any level of government, I would suggest getting involved at the city level will produce the most opportunity to see results in the future, and to help build a city that you're going to want to raise a family in, to build a career in, to stay in. And so get involved, because if you're not voting, then and you're not getting involved, somebody's going to be doing it on your behalf. So it does mean getting more engaged than just talking about it. You're right, and it's great to be engaged on social media and talking about the issues, but in the end, you also need to vote. And it's and I hope there's many young people in this city who have already shaped this city. There's a young man named Andre Bear, who I got to know in grade 11 when he was a grade 11 student at Oskayak High School, and he came along and phoned me up one day and he said, I want to get a flagpole on the front lawn of Oskayak High School to fly the treaty flag, because Broadway's one of the oldest streets in the city. And so I helped him out, and we made the arrangements, and then we had a ceremony and we put the treaty flag up on that street. Now he's the youth delegate for the Assembly of First Nations across the country. He's a young leader in the city. There is a huge opportunity for young people to become leaders and to shape the future of the city, but you have to get involved to do it. And we already have a lot of those young people that are doing it. And that's the kind of leadership that we need into the future. And that's the opportunity that I want young people to seize.
We have a large demographic of First Nations. What other examples of work do you have with them that you've done to create great things in the city?
Well, I mean, before I was a councillor, I got to know a number of other young leaders in the Indigenous community who were talking about the treaties and how little awareness. At the time, there was a survey that went out that said that 60%, I think, of Saskatchewan citizens thinks that the treaties should just simply be abolished. When in fact they're an agreement that is a binding and legal agreement between all citizens. We are all treaty people. You cannot simply abolish them without having to somehow move away and give up the sort of opportunity that we have to be here in this land. So we organized a treaty workshop at Princess Alex School, and we ended up bringing in elders and bringing in human rights commissioners and bringing in the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, and having a very large and quite hopeful gathering with the whole community to say that the treaties are actually something that can be a guide to the future on how we can build together. I've been involved in the Year of Reconciliation and attending the national gathering that we hosted here in Saskatoon out at Prairieland, and then now learning what are the recommendations from the TRC report that the city can implement, and then looking at implementing them within the city, and everything from training of our staff to looking at our housing programs and our sports and recreational programs, and to make sure that they offer fair and equal opportunity for participation. Just last week I was at Michael Linklater, a young leader in the community, organized a Boys with Braids event, and he's been a supporter of mine, and I'm happy to be working with him and supporting him to raise awareness for young people and hope with young men about the role that braids play in the culture and tradition of the Indigenous.
Actually, you bring up a good point and I believe federally, the Trudeau government just said recently they're hoping to bring about 300,000 or more individuals into Canada from the world. Saskatoon is changing. I believe in Walter Murray we have 109 different languages spoken. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of issues though still with racism.
Yes.
And it was still very much an us versus them in a lot of places. Can we talk a bit more about how we can bridge that gap?
This is a very important time for Saskatoon. We're poised at this moment in history. We've added 50,000 people to the city, but we're still a small city with 250,000 people overall, and a chance to learn from the mistakes of other cities about how we grow, about how we make sure that we grow intentionally and keep the sense of community that's here strong, address stereotypes and divisions between people, make sure there's opportunities for young Indigenous communities, people and young Syrian refugee families that are moving here, and for everybody's kids to succeed. And the mayor can be a problem solver, a collaborator, a uniter behind a vision for how we all work together to build a great city. I'm running for mayor because I see that this can work, and I know what it will take to make it happen. And so I ask people to support and work with me on that vision, because a mayor cannot do it alone. I invite you to join with me in this process of making sure that Saskatoon can become the best city to live in on the prairies.
And I think, do you have anything else that, that's all my questions. Do you have anything else that you think is important to say to any of them, to their vote?
Please check my website at www.charlieclarkformayor.com. Voting day is October 26th, and you can vote in advanced polls, this week coming up ahead of time. And if you want to get involved, please come down to our office at 340 3rd Avenue North, and we'll get you set up to volunteer and participate. It's going to be a close election, and so we're going to ask everybody to come out and help build this great city together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, thank you, Werner.